So welcome everyone to this wonderful session of our free support calls that SARA offers. And I am so elated and honored to be here with Thea Strom. Thea is a psychic medium, an animal communicator, a teacher, and an author. And she was also a very popular Animal Reiki teacher here in Oregon, and which is another reason why I wanted Thea to speak to us, because she knows better than anyone why we should be keeping animal Reiki and animal communication separate, and how we can ethically and successfully balance the two. And so Thea is passionate about bringing out the intuitive in anyone in a grounded and practical way, which is another reason why we love her, because just like the Let Animals Lead method, Thea is all about being grounded so that you don't get thrown off. And so she's going to be talking a little bit about that as well. And then, oops, sorry, just sent somebody in. And then she has recently published a book, so Animal Intuition, Communicating with Pets, Animal Spirits, and the Energies of the Natural World. So mine is all tagged up. You can see I love this book so much. What I love even more is her audio version of this book, because Thea narrates it, and she does such a beautiful job. So I not only read the hard copy, I then got, I didn't realize she narrated it until, I don't know, I would think I was looking, I went, oh, she has an audio version, because most people don't, who come out with their books. And she narrates it. And the reason I love it is because you get the benefit of having Thea lead you through some of the exercises and some of the practices, and you get to hear her beautiful voice. So that is what I want to share about that. So we're going to give away 3 copies of this because we had such a huge response. I thought 1 copy really isn't enough. We'll give away 3 copies of this. And then also, if you don't want a hard copy and you want the audio, you can choose the audio instead of the hard copy. So the reason I've asked Thea again to join us is to share her expertise, because many of us animal Reiki practitioners, we get messages from animals, but we also don't want to turn that Reiki session into an animal communication session. So Thea, without further ado, I am going to turn it over to you.
Hi, Leah. Thank you so much for having me. And what a lovely intro. It's always a pleasure to talk to the group. So,
well, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Nothing. So I guess that we can just jump at it. But, I would like, Thea, if you don't mind, I know that you have a lovely intro in your book, but for those people who don't, if you can just tell us kind of how you got started, that would be great.
Yeah. So how I came into this, it's long story short. I was always very interested in anything to do with psychics, mediums, anything to do with the world of energy. That always fascinated me, and I was always very free to explore those things. But it wasn't until my teens when I started to have some personal mental health struggles that pushed me to take meditation much more seriously. And so I started to meditate on a regular basis. And that's when I started to have some interesting experiences of random spirits connecting to me out of the blue without me, unsolicited connections. And that's when I thought, well, maybe I have a bit of a knack for this sort of thing. Maybe I should go take some classes. So I actually started off developing as a medium. And along that same time, I also started developing within Reiki as well. And through that process, I had some interesting experiences with my own animals. So one of my cats is a very talkative cat, I have come to find. And as I was developing as a medium, she started to take advantage of my opening up of my abilities, and started to use her own communication with me to, for example, solicit more food. For example, take over other sessions, other practice sessions with other people, and so on. So as I was developing as a medium, I also had the chance to try out animal communication with somebody else's animal and do it in a more conscious way. And once I did that, I completely fell in love with it, and it was just a snowball that started to form and roll from there. And from there, just started to practice animal communication much more seriously. And yeah, again, long story short, kind of coming to here today to do it as my full-time job.
Sorry about that. And so when, just a little bit, because people are going to get the book, but how did this book come about?
Yeah, the book came about. So I have never wanted to write a book. I've always been opposed to the idea, actually, because it didn't seem like a very good idea lucratively to do. Because I know that what I had heard about writing a book is that you have to, first of all, write a book, which is a lot of work, as well as you have to find an agent who is going to then help pitch your book to publishers. And there's no guarantee that it will ever get published by anybody. I also know that you can self-pub, but that also was not appealing to me. So in addition to, I just also heard that you don't really make a whole lot from it. So it didn't seem like a great I like to get readings from other practitioners, so other psychics, mediums, and that kind of thing. And in 2 readings, about a year apart, these were different psychics and mediums. Both of them mentioned that they saw me writing a book on animal communication. And as I've seen many people do when I've done sessions with them and predicted certain things, I just kind of completely blew it off. I nodded my head and smiled and said, yep, that's never, I mean, in my head, I said that's never going to happen because it would literally have to fall into my lap if that was going to happen. And a couple of months after that last reading where that was predicted, an editor who worked with a publisher reached out and asked if I had ever wanted to write a book on it. So that's the of it, how it came to be.
Well, thank you for that. You know what I love about Thea is that, and so let me know if I break up because I don't have the best internet here, this place. But what I love about you, Thea, is that you always teach me how to be in flow because you are always in flow. You're always like, well, be open to it, right? Because when we are like, oh, I want to write a book, or oh, I don't want to write a book, and then you have these walls, right? And you're never like it. You're like, well, I'll just see what happens. And everything always flows so well for you, which I think is such a really wonderful lesson for all of us as we struggle, because you just kind of go, well, just be open to what happens.
I think also luck comes into play a little bit, but yeah, I think being open to it, I guess, particular thing, sort of getting those little nudges from the universe of like writing a book, and then me kind of going, yeah, I'm not gonna put in the effort of finding an agent. So, and then it having to kind of come to me in that way. But overall, it sort of makes sense, I guess, in terms of I've already done a lot of writing about animal communication, and so it did kind of flow quite easily. Even if years ago when I started to write about animal communication, it wasn't with the thought of putting together a book necessarily. It was just following that nudge to write and teach about it.
Well, you did a beautiful job. Like I said, it is such a wonderful book. And I just really, even if you're already an animal communicator, there are so many wonderful tips in this book that I think everybody could learn and grow from. So let's get right into it. One of the things that I want to start with is something I learned from you very early on. And in fact, even before I took a class from you, was that when we go to sit with an animal, whether it's Animal Reiki or in animal communication, to always, center ourselves, right? and to bring joy into our heart. And that to me was so powerful, because when we go to do animal Reiki, a lot of times we're like, okay, I'm so serious. This is so serious. And it's really a joyful, loving time, but that's not always our energy or how we're presenting ourselves to the animals. And I really love that. So would you just talk a little bit about the importance of that for both of those modalities?
Yeah, I think especially, well, it goes for both modalities, because if you think about it, when you're meeting, and this can be, you might be doing animal Reiki or animal communication with your own animals or with other people's animals. But if you think about it in terms of, if you're meeting a stranger on the street, you're going to be much more open to talking to them or connecting with them if they are approaching you with a warm, joyful energy. So just being aware of the way in which we approach an animal is going to be so so helpful and useful in terms of them actually wanting to connect with us and wanting to communicate with us. And I think that many animals, especially those we might feel drawn to work with animal communication or animal Reiki, they might deal with a lot of anxieties of their own, and maybe they have a lot of fears about strangers, let's say. So making sure that we're using our own energy. There we go. So making sure that we can use our own energy to put the best foot forward and to start off on a good foot with the animal is I think is always a good idea. So what I usually teach my own students, especially with animal communication, is making sure that for the session, they take a little time to get centered and grounded, whatever day-to-day stuff or stresses that they're holding on to from their own life, but also to help them shift into at least a neutral, but even better, an upbeat, warm, positive energy, so that the animal is going to be much more willing to work with us.
And that's so true, because I experienced that, at care with the wild animals, animals that come in or that are abused. If you go into the shelter, if you go in and you're feeling happy and, oh, wow, and excited, you get a much different response. So thank you so much for that. So the next question I have is, so many people do both animal communication and animal Reiki at the same time. Can you explain the general differences between the two and why they should not be shared together?
Yeah, so the two practices, though they're related because they revolve around animals and our connection to them, the two practices are quite different in how they function and the way that they're done. So I can go a little bit more in depth into animal communication here and how it functions within us, the practitioners. So animal communication is when a person is actively communicating, meaning they're actively sending and receiving communication through energy with an animal is actively sending the energy of what they want to communicate to the person. The person can also actively send the energy of what they want to communicate to the animal. So you can think of this a little bit like telepathy, but I prefer to use the term animal communication. So when the animal is sending the energy of what they wish to communicate to the person, that energy is then being translated through the person's central nervous system, ending up as internal impressions. So that means the energy the animal is communicating to the person is then ending up as pictures in the person's mind, words or sounds in the person's mind, or feelings, both physical sensations in the body and emotions in the person's body. So when I think about the differences between animal Reiki and animal communication, the obvious thing is that the intention of the two are very different, right? So with animal Reiki, the intention is to create a calm and healing space, holding space for the animal. Whereas with animal communication, it is to provide the animal an outlet to express themselves and be understood by their humans. Now, the other main difference between the two that I really focus on are the differences in the practitioner's state of mind and nervous system. So with animal Reiki, that is best done in a passive state where you are focusing on being present, providing a healing space for the animal to partake in if they wish, or holding space for them. And that passive, often meditative state tends to slow down the nervous system in the person in a way that is exactly the opposite of what we want when we are doing animal communication. So during animal communication, in order to have a successful session where the information and communication from the animal is flowing through steadily, coming through, we need our nervous system to be energized and engaged in order to allow through that good flow of communication, to allow through those internal impressions, the pictures in our mind's eye, the words in our mind, the feelings in our body. So if we were wanting to do animal communication, but we're trying to do it while we're doing Animal Reiki, those two different states of being are working against each other, and you're likely not going to be as effective with either one. And so that's why I recommend you do the Animal Reiki and animal communication separately, so that each can be done as effectively as possible. An Animal Reiki background and have wanted to explore animal communication more, but you find that maybe you're not getting a lot of impressions from the animal. Maybe it's just like a few impressions here and there. It's kind of slow going. You might be actually going more into that Animal Reiki meditative state, slowing down your nervous system too much, and maybe that could be slowing down the communication as well. So the other reason I think it's a good idea to do Animal Reiki and animal communication separately, meaning not at the same time, but at separate sessions, is that with animal communication, you are speaking for another living being. And so it's important to make sure that you're well and that we're not just making things up, that our brain isn't just kind of spouting nonsense at us, which it can certainly do. So that means that we have to make sure that we're bringing through verifiable evidence about the animal in our communication. Verifiable evidence is essentially information about the animal that we didn't know beforehand, that the human can say, yes, that is true about this animal. So if I say, would you understand your cat tends to pee in the house a lot? That would be one type of verifiable evidence that the human can go, yeah, that's definitely my cat. So I definitely encourage my students to make sure that they start off an animal communication session by inviting the animal to share whatever the animal wants to talk about. First of all, allowing the animal to lead the conversation, similar to Reiki. But then when they're doing that, that also allows the animal to share things about themselves and their life that we would not have known beforehand, that includes some verifiable evidence. So that could be personality, the animal's likes, the animal's dislikes, things they want more of, behavioral challenges, whatever it is. And so that way, not only can we be sure of our connection with the animal, that yeah, we are actually connecting, we are bringing through verifiable evidence, but also then their human can take to heart those messages from the animal that can't be verified. So because they trust the connection, because you have been able to bring through other things that do make sense about the animal. And of course, allowing the animal to lead the conversation that respects them as an individual, and it allows the session to be about them, not necessarily all about the human and what their needs are. So with all of that in mind, I think it's useful to really set aside proper time for the animal communication if you're going to do that ethically. And not sort of intermingled with Animal Reiki. So it's kind of a multi-layered response, but there's many layers to why it's a good idea just to keep them separate.
So sometimes, and this is interesting because as you're speaking, I was thinking, I know that you say that sometimes if you're doing animal communication and there's more than one dog or cat or whatever in the room, or more than one animal, that messages can come in from the other animal. So would that be another reason why if you're doing Animal Reiki and a message comes in, you wouldn't even necessarily know if there were other animals present? Is that true?
Yeah.
Or...
Yeah, absolutely. Because even if we like to think of animal communication as being like, I'm calling on a cell phone to this other cat, and they're the only ones that can pick up on that. That's not really quite how animal communication works. Often it's a little bit like a group call with all the animals in the home, and so that means it's a little bit of a free-for-all for all of them. That does mean that that's another reason why it's really helpful to have to be able to bring through a little bit of verifiable evidence so that you can make sure of who is communicating when too. And so again, another reason to kind of set up a proper time to do the animal communication, because it might not actually be the animal that you think is communicating. It could very much be, very well be a different one too.
And I think that's really important. And what's really funny is in the book, there's actually this little story about a cell phone and an animal that is really quite amazing. So I was thinking
that is true. In that case, it was there was
it really was
a call on
it was quite funny. But and that's what I love too about your book is you have so many different testimonials and stories from people. I know one of my stories is in there as well, and it really helps enrich the book because there's all of this almost like verifiable proof this is all happening. So sometimes though we're sitting there in Animal Reiki and you do get a message, and let's say it's definitely from this animal. The question I have is, do all messages need to be shared? Is it sometimes, are they maybe just showing you or maybe releasing it even?
Yeah, I think so a couple of things could actually be happening when you're doing Animal Reiki and you're noticing impressions coming in from the animal. So first of all, it could be that the animal is communicating that to you, but it might not actually be that. It could be that you are just picking up on things about the animal psychically or intuitively from their energy as well. And it's also very possible that you are just witnessing certain energies, traumas, or other things being released. So there could be a few different things happening, and it's not necessarily always that the animal is choosing to, communicate something specific with you. And I think that it's important to be aware of that. So there is a difference between information, so picking up just something psychically from somebody's energy, versus communication. With communication, the animal is actively deciding on what they want to communicate with you, and then they are actively communicating that and then sending the energy of that. Right? However, it's totally possible for the person to just tune into an animal's energy and explore the animal's energy on that person's initiative. And sometimes that happens without realizing that we're doing it. We're just sort of maybe curious about the animal. We're placing our awareness on the animal, and we're just kind of tuning into their energy without even realizing we're doing that. Now, in my classes, I tend to focus on the animal communication bit versus psychically tuning in, because first of all, with communication, the animal has agency. The animal can decide themselves what info that they want to share and how. And often that's very therapeutic for the animal. It gives them a voice. They huge results in the relationship with their human. Just tuning psychically into the animal's energy, we might end up picking up on things that the animal isn't actually wanting to share about. And it can be a little bit invasive even. It can be a little bit of a crossing of boundaries. So that's a little bit the other reason why I encourage people, if they notice some impressions coming through during Animal Reiki, mentally take note of those impressions, but wait maybe till after the session, see if the human is open to you communicating with the animal, and then see if the animal is open to communicating with you. And then you would just approach it more as a proper animal communication session. See what impressions come up. If those same impressions come up again, you can be more certain that those things, the animal does want those things to be shared with their human. It just kind of can keep it a little more clean, and you can be a little bit more certain it wasn't just you picking up those things psychically. The animal is actually to talk about those things with their human.
So just really quickly, just kind of to piggyback on that, is there ever a time when you shouldn't share something with the owner, or should you always just share everything like in an animal communication session?
Yeah, I think, yeah, the context matters. So in an animal communication session, the info that the animal is sharing with me as the animal communicator is in the context of that I am there to be their translator to share whatever the animal wants to share with their human. So they are sharing things with me because they want to share it with their human. It's set up that way. When I'm inviting the animal into the conversation, I let them know that I'm there to be the translator. I let them know that it's there, that I'm here to help their humans understand them better, and so on. So they're very aware of that. So in that context, I will usually share everything that the animal shares, because that's the job I'm there for. If the animal is clear on that fact, then whatever they want to share, that to me ethically feels fine to share with their human. The wonderful thing about animal communication is that the animal has some agency in what they want to talk about. So if there are things that they don't want to share with their human, then they're probably not going to bring those things up. But I will say there are certain things that I use a little more caution around sharing with the human, or things that I would just maybe approach a little more delicately, be aware of how I'm phrasing things. For example, if the animal wants to talk about their past before they came to their human, and let's say that animal was horrifically abused in their past, I would not likely go into graphic details about that abuse, the human. I will be very cautious about sharing any of that, or at least wait for the person to ask me for specifics if they want. I might share the gist of the abuse, but not necessarily the graphic details. Most of the time, it's not going to be helpful for the person or the animal if I share the super graphic details. And it could be traumatizing for the person to have that in their mind. And it could be re-traumatizing for the animal that their humans now are extra anxious for them. So I use my own judgment with things in that way, or how I phrase things. Yeah. So
Yeah, I think I like how you said that about, the animal might be sharing these things, but then I like how you said that sharing that with the human can re-traumatize everyone, right? And that's really important for us to remember that when we share. Because I was just thinking specifically, I know that comes up in Animal Reiki. Oh, well, the animal showed me this. And so again, I think your instruction to then ask the animal, I guess, would you ask the animal then, oh, do you want to share this with your person? Or, I mean, after the animal, when you say you've taken note of it, and you may have already said that, and I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, yeah, after the session, after taking note of it and finishing up with the Animal Reiki, then I would first of all ask the permission of the human if they'd be open to me doing animal communication, and then I would, because not everybody is gonna, people have all kinds of beliefs in the world, so and then I would ask the animal if they would like to communicate, in which case I don't think I would ask the animal specifically, would you like me to share this one little thing that I picked up on earlier with the human? I would actually maybe more just approach it as like a general session. And then if the animal brings it up with me again, then I would share it with the human. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But you certainly could just check in with them. Hey, did you want to share that? But I just, I guess I would make sure that it's not just about that piece of information. I just kind of open up the conversation a little bit more, anything else that the animal wants to share, and so on.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I really appreciate that clarification, because I think that happens a lot. There's just a little something. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean the animal wants to speak, they're just sharing, like they would with a friend. So one of the other things that I wanted to ask you was, when you're talking about this, like things that are going to upset the humans. And one of them might be about passing, right? When an animal is getting ready to pass, whether they're getting ready to pass right now or getting ready to pass like in a few months. And what I thought was really interesting in your book, you talked about how you talked about euthanasia, which we'll get to in just a second. But you also talked about how like the animal will kind of like, it's not necessarily going to happen now, but they know it's coming. And then how to share that with a human.
Yeah. So this is another thing that I would be a little cautious about because, again, not every person is going to be ready to talk about those things. You know, I will feel it out a little bit if it seems like the animal really wants to talk about their preferences around their passing, or they really want to talk about, or they're very aware that it's coming up in the future. Um, I will check in with the person, see are they open to us going into that conversation, because some people are a little bit in denial about certain things. So I'll just feel it out a little bit, see if there is a way for us to go into those things. And I'm not just gonna like dump that information right on the person without checking in a little emotionally first, you know? So yeah, just being a little bit cautious about going into it. The other thing is that many people, especially with animals who are dying, they're very ill, or just really old. Some people will ask me, like, you know, does my animal know when they're going to pass away, or do they have a sense of that? And that is also another one of these things that I tend to be a little bit cautious about. Because I could absolutely be wrong. The animal might have a general sense, but they could also be wrong. Something could happen way before they think they're going to pass, something sudden like a heart attack, or, you know, anything can happen. So I always make sure that the person knows that. And I also generally don't like to predict when somebody's going to pass away, just because if I am wrong, the person is going to be extremely anxious about that timing, most likely. And if I'm wrong, it's all for nothing, you know. So there's it's just it's one of those things that, because of the margin of error that can come up there, it's not necessarily always going to be useful for everybody. And some people think they want to know, but I think if we were to know that, we would necessarily appreciate that information. So but yeah, I think, yeah, sometimes I'll get a bit of a general sense from the animal, you know, how are they feeling in their body? Are they feeling like they have the energy to continue on, or do they feel like they're mentally preparing to pass, and getting ready for that? Some animals, you know, they might have a lot of health issues going on, but mentally they're very much like continuing to chug along and quite happy still in their life, you know. So checking in a little bit about the mental state with the animal is useful, usually useful in those instances. You know, is the animal really open to continuing to do treatment, or are they really exhausted from that kind of thing? So
I remember, well, you and I are close, and I remember when you did a reading for my dogs. There were three, so we'll talk in a minute about that, how you kind of juggle, because I remember Reba was taking over the whole conversation. But one of the things that happened during that, and I don't know, and maybe I'm not sure if you remember, if you can just talk generally, but you said after the session, because we were close and you knew how I felt about Reba, you said, would you be upset if you knew she was going to die early? I had already been feeling that she wasn't going to live to be long. I think she was only 2 when the reading was had, and she died when she was 4. Now, obviously, she didn't die the next year, the next day, or anything. But can you address that at all?
I don't remember the particular situation, so I don't know that I can talk about it.
But if there was like maybe what an animal would show you that you would go, oh yeah.
Yeah. I think yeah, maybe in that case, if I remember correctly, Reba had a few like, she came into life with a bit of a wonky body. And yeah, if an animal references, you know, because some animals, you know, tell me that they came into life with a bit of a lemon with their body. And so yeah, some might have again, it's going to be so individual from animal to animal, but some do have a pretty good sense of like of their expectations of life due to, you know, just knowing about the situation and that they're not necessarily doing that great health wise. Or so that was probably a situation there where I was probably Reba was bringing up in relation to in relation to that. But I don't
Yes.
remember. But yeah,
Yeah.
so that certainly can happen. Yeah, but again, it's like I always want to be cautious and make sure that the person knows, like, hey, I could always be wrong, because again, it can be really crushing for some people, and so on. So, but maybe keeping that in mind, they can be a little more mentally prepared for if it should come up. In that case, I think you already had sensed that yourself, so it wasn't
Right.
a shock.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that another thing here that comes up with animals dying is the and you talk about this in your book, and I really encourage, there's a whole section on animals passing, is that what about euthanasia? You know, there's such a decisive, you know, black and white. Yes, we euthanize. No, we don't euthanize. You know, how animals feel about euthanasia. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in most cases, in my experience, I can always only speak from my experience. Of course, it's always going to be very individual from animal to animal, how they view things, because they are individuals. But in terms of connecting to animals that have passed away and they passed through euthanasia, um, most of them very much phrase it for me in a way that they were helped to cross over, not that their life was cut short or that they were murdered by it, you know. So when they're viewing euthanasia from the spirit world, they're very much viewing it as a very compassionate choice, that they're also very aware that most people um, don't don't like being put in the position of having to make that choice for their animal, but ultimately having to make that choice for their animal as a way to care for their animal as well. Because in some cases there is nothing left to help the animal with, and in a lot of cases euthanasia is preferred for many animals versus passing kind of on their body's own time, randomly, unexpectedly, in pain sometimes. So also with living animals, they tend to view euthanasia as the preferred way for a few reasons. If possible, of course, it's not always possible to choose euthanasia for our animals. But if it is possible, many animals do like the aspect that they can kind of prepare for it. Their humans can put together a going away, you know, a going away party for the animal. Uh, um, their humans can plan to do some of the animal's favorite things before the animal passes. Um, they can um, they can kind of plan a whole week even around the passing, where the animal gets to do all their favorite things and the human gets to have a little bit more closure as well around the animal's passing. So in a lot of cases, many animals prefer it. I think there is a little bit of this idea out there that euthanasia, you know, is interrupting the animal's karmic path or whatever. I'm not sure. There's many interesting ideas out there. But in most cases, that's not how the animal sees it. And some animals are like, you know, they're still chugging along. They're not really in that mindset of wanting to pass anytime soon. And some animals do prefer to just pass away on their body's own time as well. So it's always going to be very unique and individual. But either way, if you have had to make that choice for your animal in the past, knowing that when they are in the spirit world, they get to see all the reasons why you chose what you chose to do for them, and nobody ever feels betrayed by that when they get to the spirit world.
Yeah, and I think that was my actual next question was, a lot of us have animals that have passed and we maybe didn't do it what we felt was the right thing to do. Like maybe circumstances should have been better. And so then we have a lot of regrets and a lot of, I don't know, pain and guilt around it. So, what do animals show you when they come back to talk, like animals that are past, so that would that
Yeah.
help us?
Well, they often bring up all the like little situations that led to those choices that you had to make for them, you know. So maybe you actually had to help them cross via euthanasia because you ran out of money for their treatments and you knew they were suffering with, you know, cancer or whatever. Or maybe they bring, you know, so just the animal bringing up all those aspects of what went into those choices shows that they're very aware of those things, even if in life there was no way for them to know those things. Usually when they cross to the spirit world, they get a big overview of the things that happened in life. And so um they bring those things up to show you, hey, I know about those things. And also they understand the bigger picture. And also typically the animals bring those things up to show that they're not mad at anybody as well, that they understand those choices and ultimately that they're grateful for those choices, or that they see the love that went into those choices. Also, I think we tend to think that everything is kind of in our hands when we're trying to navigate helping our animal through certain health issues or other issues. But there's a lot of other like life circumstances that get in the way, and not everything is actually in our hands. And still, especially with euthanasia, we tend, you know, that choice in particular, because we are the ones who are having to decide those things for our animals. It can often feel like that is all in our hands when actually you're just the one being put in that position of having to make that choice. Even if it feels like, oh, this is you deciding to end their life, you know. Often an animal would likely have passed away soon after, anyways, but in more pain. So, when after passing, um, it's to show that they're doing just fine in the spirit world as well, and that they don't have, they're not harboring any ill will towards their humans, and that they love their humans just as much as before. I think you mentioned guilt, which is such a big of the grieving process. Guilt is just one of those, well, I think guilt is a few different things, but it's, first of all, I think it comes up for all of us, no matter what the situation was with our animal. You know, even if you did absolutely everything perfect, you did absolutely everything you could possibly do for your animal, even those people are still going to have guilt over something, because I think it's just our brain's natural way of trying to process the loss. And I think it can be a little bit of a defense mechanism that our brains try to do. You know, if only we had done things differently, we wouldn't be feeling this amount of pain with the loss. Or I think it can be a little bit of a distraction away from the pain of the loss as well. You know, the brain's like, oh, it just feels too horrible. So we have to almost like grab on to some things that maybe if we could have changed, if we could have figured those things out, then we wouldn't have to feel all these big feelings of sadness. So I think it's a very natural thing, and knowing that you're probably going to feel that no matter what. And giving yourself time. I don't think there's any way to necessarily overcome those feelings other than feel the feelings. And yourself time to feel the feelings.
Oh, thank you for that. Because that's such a big, I mean, I know we keep talking about animals that pass, and I have one more question, then we're going to move on to a different topic, but it is something that we all go through. And it is such a painful process. And so there are a lot of questions I can see about this. So are the last question about animals that have passed that we have is, are the techniques the same for connecting with an animal that is still here on Earth as they are with connecting to an animal that is passed?
Yeah, essentially animal communication with an animal that's living versus an animal that's passed is the exact, because what it is at its essence is it's connecting soul to soul with an animal. So connecting soul to soul with an animal that's passed, connecting soul to soul with an animal that's living. The only difference is the one that's living happens to have a body. So the two function the exact same, other than that, you know, you're connecting soul to soul with them. The energy that they're communicating to you is then being translated into those impressions, images in your mind's eye, feelings, thoughts, and so on. So it's all coming through the exact same. It all functions the exact same. I think we can get a little bit caught up in this idea of like where is the spirit world? You know, like, is it above us, below us? Like, where is it? And I think it's helpful to think of it as a little bit like a parallel world. So it's all around us. And so our animals that have passed away still get to spend time in the same places that they used to. Like, they can still come and visit you in the home if they want to, but they're also free to go explore other places as well. So, and that's the other thing that I think a lot of people also worry about, is that their animal is now stuck in their home or stuck where they passed. And it's not the case. They're free to go wherever they want to. And so often any animals do choose to come and visit you in your home again. And if like bedtime was really important for them, then they'll show up for that often. Or so yeah, you can think of it a little bit like all around you. Yes. Oh, you're muted.
You also have a section in your book, and I'm just going to keep referring back because it's such an incredible book. You have a little exercise that I thought was really helpful about connecting with animals that passed. And we don't have to go into that right now, but I just wanted to tell people that actually Thea does have this really cool exercise that you can do in there too. And so, of course, it is the same, but there is this really cool exercise. So I just wanted to, since we're kind of talking about this and about communicating, connecting, one of the questions we have is, how do you discern if an animal is actually communicating with you as opposed to your own thoughts and feelings? Especially if an animal is passed, we have a lot of deep feelings about that, right?
Yeah. If just on that note, if a person is still heavily grieving the animal that's passed away, I wouldn't recommend that that person tries to connect, especially if the person is deeply in that sort of guilt stage as well. Then it's not, you know, if you still have a lot of those things swirling around you, it's going to be hard to stay objective, unfortunately. So giving yourself a little bit more time. You can certainly try, but if you do find that you're getting a lot of like negative impressions, or like feeling like your animal is mad at you from the spirit world, like those things are probably good signs that maybe take a little bit more time to honor your grieving process before connecting. Sorry, what was your question? Oh, telling the difference between what's from your own mind versus what's from the animal. Yeah, that's a classic question. So I don't, so there's a few answers to this. I don't, so what happens, right, is that when somebody then tries to communicate with an animal or do animal communication, whether it's their own animals or somebody else's, they will get caught in this thinking of trying to discern, oh, was that my own brain or was that from the animal? And they're in that state the whole time trying to connect to the animal, and it's actually bringing them out of the flow of the communication. So that being in that discerning state of mind is actually most likely getting in your way. So that's why I recommend that people try to practice animal communication with an animal that maybe isn't your own, maybe a friend's animal or somebody else's animal, where you can get some feedback from the person about whether or not the information you were bringing through from the animal, if that actually makes sense about that animal. Because then you can get a little bit of a boost of confidence, like, oh yeah, when I was bringing through that, I really was connecting. Like, oh, everything seems to be off. Maybe I have to work on this a little bit more, you know? So it's going to be getting that feedback from somebody afterwards is going to be hugely helpful for you to get a sense of, okay, what does it feel like when I am actually connecting and communicating? So there's that. The differences between what it feels like when an animal is communicating and what's from your brain is quite subtle. So it honestly, I recommend people just to practice as much as possible. Again, it's not useful to get into that discerning space during the actual communication. You can go, hey brain, I know we're all skeptical and I'm happy to try to discern, but let's do that afterwards. So during these 15 minutes, I'm just going to sit down and accept and acknowledge anything and everything that comes through, whether it's from the animal or whether it's from my brain. And then after, I can sift through that and see, okay, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. The thing about animal communication, like I said, it's the animal is sending the energy of what they're wanting to communicate. And then that energy is translated through through our central nervous system. So what often happens is that the energy that they're sending is triggering things that you have experienced in your own life to show you, or so that you can understand better the energy of what the animal is sharing with you. For example, what often happens is that, let's say you're connecting to a dog, and all of a sudden you see in your mind's eye your own dog and the way in which your own dog likes to dig holes in the yard. It's not that this other dog is your old dog, or it's not that your dog is now interrupting the conversation. It is what's happening often is that that dog shared info with you about loving to dig holes in the yard. And then that got translated into that image of your own dog. And that's because those two are similar. So you can now recognize that energy better because you have had that experience with your own dog before. And it's just a way in which that energy can explain itself better to you. So the temptation there is for us to go, oh, that is just my own brain because that's my own dog. That's not this dog. But actually, most likely, it certainly could be that other dog. It's just that you are understanding that energy in a way that you can understand it better because you have had those experiences. Does that make sense?
That does. And you talk about that in your book. And I thought that that was really helpful, how you get messages, but your own discernment, right? So like, I think you did an example in there about like a top hat and then what that could mean. And like, if you see it mean a certain thing to you. So no, I love that. That is really helpful. And again, you know, if this is new to you or this is interesting to you, be sure to get the book because Thea talks more about this, and especially going back to like the whole confidence thing. She has a whole section about confidence and how to build your confidence. So since we're talking about like our discernment and everything, let's go back to when you are talking to like for instance, I had you come to talk to, I think it was Leo, because we had to put his best friend Titus down. And I was worried about how Leo was processing it. And Reba, who was there, really took over the conversation. Every question you would say, does Leo like toys? No, that's Reba. Does Leo like to do, or do this? No, that's Reba. Like she kept interrupting the conversation. So how do you handle that?
Yeah, so I call it juggling animals or animals hijacking a conversation. So first of all, the way I like to think about it is when I am opening up to do a conversation, to do animal communication with an animal in somebody's home. And it's like I'm tapping into the home phone line for those who have had home phone lines or landlines before. I don't know if anybody remembers where if you had multiple, one person could, you could be on the phone with someone, and then somebody else in the home could pick up the other phone and listen in. So it's a little bit like that. All the animals that are connected to that human that you're doing the session for, it's most likely going to be a little bit of a free for all. So that means that animals that are very talkative, you might notice that they are very talkative during the session. Animals that are very vocal naturally, they might be very talkative during the session as well. If they're very outgoing, if the dynamic between them and the other animals is where they naturally try to take over, they might try to do that in the session as well. So typically, let's say I am scheduled to just connect to one dog in a home with 4 dogs, let's say. Then I of course let the person know that I have no control over the others. If they want to talk, they'll talk, but I'll do my very best to focus on the one I'm supposed to be connecting to. And also, if let's say you have one of the others communicating, the best way is just to go with the flow of it. So it's useless to try to fight it. I have found the more you try to fight it, it just falls apart. So just go with the flow of it. Let's say you do have a different animal that's wanting to connect. I would just see what that animal really wants to share, help them get that off their chest. And then once I feel like they've shared what they wanted to, I can move back to the one I had intended to connect to. So yeah, it's just one of the wonderful things about communication.
Yeah, and that happened. I remember you connected to the tigers at Care, Tigger and Pumpkin, and Tigger was more shy and Pumpkin was more vocal. And I really wanted to talk to Tigger, but Pumpkin came through and told you no, she was going to do the talking because he didn't want to.
Yes.
That is really fun.
That certainly can happen. And sometimes if there is one who just really is not open to talking to me, then it's really useful for me to have those other animals in the home, because maybe they have their own perspective of what's going on with that first animal that isn't as talkative with me. And yeah, using it to our advantage is because yeah, if you have others that are really talkative, then they actually might be wanting to help with the session too, even. So they could see you struggling with that one animal and they're like, oh, this person needs some help. Let me share some things here.
So. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. So really, I think the lesson, the takeaway here is just to be open and to go with the flow and to not be so, it has to look like this.
Yes, not be too stuck on your own agenda. Being open to the animals, kind of knowing what's best for them and what they really need to talk about and what they want to share about and who needs to share as well in the home, because sometimes it's a little surprising what can come through. And maybe those let's say the one that you were not scheduled to talk to but is very talkative in the session, they could have some important things that they really want to share that maybe were a little unexpected but still important. So yeah, going with the flow of it. And again, that's where making sure you're able to verify some evidence, it really helps you be clear on who it is communicating, and so that you're not, speaking for an animal, but it's not actually them connecting.
Right. Well, thank you for that. And I just, there's so much information and I hope you're all getting a lot from this like I am. And again, so much of this is in the book, but one thing I want to do that's in the book, Thea, since we're kind of talking about this a lot, is there an easy exercise that we could do right now together?
Yeah, so I'm assuming most people here have an animal, at least one animal companion. If not one that is their own companion, maybe one that they engage with a lot, maybe a neighbor's animal or something like that. So yeah, I thought I'd maybe guide you guys through a little bit of a connection with your own animal. And this is without any, what's the word? Any expectations of getting anything in return from our animal here. It is all about just guiding you through some of the steps that we do when we are doing animal communication. But again, it's without any expectation of the animal communicating anything with us. We're just going to focus on setting up that connection and being in that presence with them. So I'll just go ahead here. You're nodding. Alrighty, so if everybody could take a moment and maybe get comfortable in your chair. And if you feel comfortable, closing your eyes and just taking a few deep breaths. We're not going to try to go into a very deep meditation here, but just getting a little bit comfortable and relaxed. And you can take a few moments to just notice any tension or pain in your body. Just becoming aware of that, acknowledging any tension or pain in your own body. You can take a moment to breathe into those areas. And with each exhale, just feeling that tension, relaxing a little bit more. And I want you all to also either see or feel yourselves standing. And I want you to see or feel yourselves standing in a waterfall of divine light. And it's okay if you can't visualize it clearly. Just however it's coming through to you is fine. And I want you to see or feel that waterfall of light washing over your body, washing away any foreign energies, any negative energies, any stress or tension from this past week, and any fears or doubts about your own abilities to connect to your own animals. And just see it all wash away. We don't need those right now. And now I want you to bring your awareness to the center of your chest, to your heart center, and there is a bright ball of energy. And I want you to just place your awareness on that energy at the center of your chest. And with each exhale, I want you to see or feel or just know that that energy there is expanding out, big and bright, filling up your chest, filling up your body. And filling up the space around you. So just noticing that energy expanding out from the center of your chest to that space around you without any additional effort. We're just allowing our heart center to expand out the way it's made to do. And as you do so, I want you to bring to mind your feelings of love for your animals. Maybe there's one in particular you're thinking of, or maybe you're thinking about a few different ones, and that's okay. And I want you to just bring to mind your feelings of love that you have for that animal. And feel into your excitement that you get to know that animal. And just really steep yourself in energy there of love and excitement, just knowing this animal, getting to be in its presence in this lifetime. How wonderful is that? And now I want you to see or feel that light from your heart center now expanding out to connect to your animal companion's heart center. And again, it's okay if you can't visualize it clearly, just know that with your intention, that's where the energy is going. So just connecting your heart light to that animal's heart center. And as you do so, I want you to take a moment to send them lots and lots of love. Maybe sending them thoughts of love, maybe sending them those feelings that you are feeling of love towards them. And I want you to mentally ask them if they'd be open to communicating. And you might not get a specific response here. We're just going to accept and acknowledge whatever comes through. And you can mentally invite them to share with you whatever they want to share with you, but without any expectations. We're just going to open up that line of communication and invite them to share whatever they want to share. And if we're not getting anything, that's okay. We're just going to sit in this connection with them, heart to heart. And if you'd like, you can also send them your thoughts of love, your thoughts of gratitude for them, anything you'd like to share with them. You can take a moment to do that now. And then you can see or feel that connection between your hearts now, coming back to your heart, bringing that light back to your heart center. You can bring your awareness back to your body. You can thank the animal. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
Wow, thank you so much, Thea. That was so wonderful. And that's what I love about your book, the audio version, because you walk through not that long, but you do walk through some exercises. And it's just so wonderful to have you do that. And it helps facilitate that. Now I'm like in another world, so I got to bring myself.
Yes.
So one thing that came up I wanted to have plenty of time to do the exercise, and we have to do the drawing as well. But and so people are saying, oh, so great, thank you, and thank you, lovely meditation, very nice. So thank you so much for that, Thea. One thing, and that was beautiful. So one thing I want to ask about that comes up, and I know that you address it in your book, is about reincarnation and animals being reincarnated. And I know you have a really wonderful information about that. And could you?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's a question that comes up a lot in sessions, or just people are curious about it. So again, I don't pretend to know everything about everything and how everything works in the universe. However, I can always just speak from my own experience. So in sessions when that question has come up, I always, connect to the animal that's passed away. For example, some people might wonder if the animal that's passed away, if that animal will reincarnate back into their human's life, right? So I find that it tends to be very individual from animal to animal, kind of what they decide to do. I don't think there's any hard and fast rules for it. So that means that some animals do decide to reincarnate back into their human's life. Some decide to do it quite quickly within like a year or two after their passing. And some kind of want to keep it as an option a little further down the road. But in a lot of cases, many animals decide to stick to the spirit world for now. And usually it's not anything personal. Usually it's just whatever that animal decides is best for their life path and soul's path. And sometimes they like to or they feel like they can help their humans better from the spirit world. Actually, they can help align things in a way that they can't really do when they're living in a body. And also some animals want to send their humans other animals into their humans life, so they want to make maybe space for other animal souls to come into their human's life that maybe there wouldn't be space for them if they did reincarnate back into their human's life. So there could be many different reasons for it, but I have seen it happen. And typically, what happens then is, let's say the animal does decide to reincarnate back into their human's life, then the human can get a little bit paranoid about making sure they get the right animal to them at the right time, or feeling like they have to stand on the right street corner at the right exact second to get the right animal to them. So typically it's not something you have to overthink too much. Typically I encourage people to just first of all, those in the spirit world are the ones that are going to align things to make sure that that particular animal does make it into that particular human's life again. So they're doing most of the work in the spirit world. Then it's up to the human to make sure that they're just kind of following their own intuition around it. If they start to feel that draw to go look at animals at a particular shelter, just following that draw, or if they start to feel drawn to a particular one, just following that draw and trusting that if things work out, it's meant to be. Yeah, so I don't want anybody to get too paranoid.
Yeah. No, and you talk more about this in your book. And so, I just encourage again people to go get the book, because you cover so many different of these topics that we've covered on the call, but you obviously go into them in more depth. And so I don't want to take up too much time, but the section on reincarnation was really interesting. And I know that a lot of things you've shared with me too. And it was really, it helps you, I don't know, have hope, right?
Yeah.
Some of the animals that you love so deeply, you just want them to come back at some point in some time. And like you said, sometimes they take time to do that. Sometimes they don't want to do that. I know in your book too, you talk about like these one people, their animal passed, and they immediately wanted to talk to him, and you're like, you got to give animals kind of some time to get.
Yeah, and it's often not necessarily the animal who needs time to settle into the spirit world, but it's often people need to be in the right space, mentally even, to actually receive the messages from their animal. Because the grieving process, there's so much that's going on, even on a chemical sense, like what's going on in our brains. Like, it's just like we can be walking around in like a fog, and that's not the best state to receive a session even, or a communication from our animals. So yeah.
Yeah, and you talk about that, how people can really, they're not ready to hear some of the things that maybe the animal wants to share. And so if when they're in that grieving space, and you go into depth in the book about what to be mindful of and what to look for, and how to navigate that. There's just so much great information in there. And we're going to do our drawing soon. Let me see. Oh my gosh, this has gone so fast. One more question that I had personally, because this was a personal experience. So there are times when you're connecting with animals, let's say like the wild orca. And like for me, I connected with them, and it wasn't really communication. It was just like connecting, and I felt their joy, right? I felt joy at the connection. But then an animal communicator there's three of us, and two of us, one was another animal communicator, got this joy, but the other one started crying. She got all the pain. Can you just talk a little bit about why that happens? Like somebody will pick up on the pain and somebody will pick up on the joy.
Yeah. So this is the tricky thing. Well, first, I can't speak. I have no clue what was going on there, because I wasn't connecting to Orca either. So I don't know. I can speak to that situation in particular, but I think it's very possible that some people were tuning into the animal's current emotional state, right? It's also possible that some people were tuning into the animal's past trauma or emotional state from that, or it's possible that some people were witnessing the release of certain emotions. It's also possible that some people are projecting certain things onto the animal, things that they assumed about it that aren't necessarily true for that animal. So it can be a little bit tricky, but also, yeah, even two animal communicators connecting to one animal about one specific topic, we're still probably going to pick up on slightly different things, because the way that I talked about it earlier, the way that it's coming through, it's working through our own frame of reference. That means that each of us might have different strengths in what types of things we tend to be really good at being able to recognize in a session in terms of the energy coming through. And I think also we have, within each animal communicator, there's also just tendencies of what things we like to tune into as well, or like what things we like to focus on as well. So it's very possible that certain people are naturally very interested in animals' trauma, let's say. And so that could be what they're kind of focusing on in terms of what they're bringing through too. It's hard to say, but that there's a lot of things that could happen. And that's why it's a little bit tricky with intuitive abilities. We have to be a little specific about what we're connecting to, what we're placing awareness on, what we're tuning into. And sometimes we're not always aware of exactly what we're tuning into, even if we're getting some intuitive impressions coming in. So yes, I don't know. That's kind of a, a mixed bag in terms of my response.
I really appreciate that, because that was one situation that came up, and I mean that. And then we've got to do the name drawing, but just really quickly, if you can just do it quickly. Somebody asked, what's the difference between communication and a reading? Like animal communicating and then an animal reading. Is there a difference, or is it just?
Well, I don't know. People use the term so differently. Some animal communicators call themselves a pet psychic, but what does that mean? Like it's just so typically I call my sessions readings sometimes, because at its essence, what the animal communicator is doing is reading the energy that the animal is communicating to us. So we are reading the energy of the communication and then putting that into the words for the human to understand. So any intuitive session, whether it's animal communication or mediumship or a psychic reading or remote viewing or whatever, typically we'd call all of those readings if they're like a session that you're sitting down to connect and you're reading energy. Yeah, so that's one of these things about it is like we'll use all the different terms all differently, and so there's no like consensus around it. But yeah, hopefully, but I did talk a little bit earlier about the difference, I guess, between animal communication versus just psychically tuning into the animal's energy.
Yeah.
And there is that difference there. So I don't know if that's part of the question, maybe.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you. So we're going to do our drawings. We had 3. I didn't know how much time we had, so I did 2. It's this wheel thing that I hit. And one of them was Susan Axe. So Susan Axe, congratulations. And that's AXE is her last name. And then also another Susan Callan, Callan. So yay, Susan. And so I'm going to do one more because it makes this really loud spin thing. So we're doing 3. And again, if you can get hardback or you can get the Audible, and I'll email you after and get your preference and your address if you want a hard copy. So the last person to win is, sorry, it's taking time, is Tina Wilkinson. So congratulations, Tina. Yay. So that's Tina, Susan Axe, and Susan Callan. And so congratulations to you for winning. And Thea, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I'm going to switch the view to gallery view so that everyone who is on camera can wave to you and say goodbye. And cannot thank you. Oh, wait. So T says, love the, oh, okay. Thanks, Thea, for the presentation. Thank you, T. Yes, I loved making that video. And Deborah Layden said, thank you. Lots of people saying thank you. You can say it in the chat or you can unmute for a minute and say thank you to Thea. It's been so amazing. You're so amazing, Thea.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much, everybody.
Get the book. The recording of this will go out in an email along with a link to Thea's book. Also along to a link to Thea's classes. She has animal communication classes that come up that she teaches online. She also has a mediumship class that's coming up, right, Thea?
Yeah, actually starting this Sunday. It's the mediumship course. Yeah.
So if you're interested in becoming a medium, you have lots of thank yous here. If you're interested in becoming a medium, I highly recommend studying with Thea. And that is also online, right, Thea?
Yep.
Are you doing any in-person classes here in Oregon?
No.
I don't think anyone is. Everyone's like happy to be online. So if you'd like to study animal communication, I encourage you to study with Thea. Her website is called theahealer.com, and I'll put it here, theahealer.com. You can find out more information about her. And I don't know if you have a link to your book on your website as well. I think you do, Thea.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then also you can get this at Amazon. You could just search Thea Strom, or I will also send a link. So congratulations to Susan, and Tina. And I will be reaching out to all of you to get your preference on the book. All right. Thank you, Thea.
Thank you, everybody. It was so lovely to see you all. And yeah, thanks so much for having me, Leah.
Oh, absolutely. This has been amazing. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.